Hello, children. It's time to read you a classic. How Riddick Stole Christmas. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But Riddick, who just lived north of Whoville, did not. Riddick hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now, please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be that his head wasn't screwed on just right, or it could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, Riddicky frown at the warm little lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath were busy now hanging their mistletoe wreath. "And they're hanging their stockings," he snarled with a sneer. "Tomorrow is Christmas, it's practically here." Then he growled, with his Riddick fingers nervously drumming, "I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming." For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early and they'd rush for their toys. And then, oh the noise, noise. That's one thing he hated, was the noise. Then the Whos, young and old, would sit down to a feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast. They'd feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beef, which was something Riddick couldn't stand in the least. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and those Whos would start singing. And they'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing. And the more Riddick thought of his Christmas Who sing, the more Riddick thought, "I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now. I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. But how?" Then he got an idea, an awful idea. Riddick got a wonderful, awful idea. "I know just what I'll do." Riddick laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat, and he chuckled and chuckled. "What a great Riddicky trick! With this hat and this coat, I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer." Riddick looked around, but since reindeer were scarce, there was none to be found. Did that stop old Riddick? "Oh no," Riddick simply said. "If I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead." So he called his dog Max, and he took some red thread, and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then Riddick said, "Giddy up!" and the sleigh started down towards the homes where the Whos lay snooze in their town. All the windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Whos were dreaming sweet dreams without care when he came to the first little house on the square. "This is stop number 1, the old Riddick Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could Riddick. He got stuck only once for a moment or two, then stuck his head out of the fireplace flue where the little Who stockings all hung in the row. "These stockings," he groaned, "are the first things to go." Then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant. Around the whole room he took every present. Pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn and plums. He stuffed them in bags. Then Riddick very nimbly stuffed all the bags one by one up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast feast. He cleaned out the icebox as quick as a flash. Why, Riddick even took the last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. "And now," grinned Riddick, "I will stuff up the tree." And Riddick grabbed the tree and he started to shove when he heard a small sound like a little coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a small Who. little Cindy Lou who was no more than 2. Riddick had been caught by this tiny Who daughter who had gotten out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at Riddick and said, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" But you know that old Riddick was so smart and so slick, he thought up a lie and he thought it up quick. "Why, my sweet little tot," the fake Santa Claus lied, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side. So I'm taking it back to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there and I'll bring it back here." And his fib fooled the child, and he patted her head, got her a drink, and sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuck the tree up. The last thing he took was a log for their fire, then went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On the walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire, and the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 1/4 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a-snooze, when he packed up his sled. He packed up their presents, their ribbons, their wrappings, the tags and the tinsels, the trimmings, the trappings. 3,000 feet up to the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode to the very tip-top to dump it. "Pooh-pooh to the Who's," he was ridically humming. "They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two, and then all the Who's down in Whoville will all cry, 'Boo-hoo!'" "A noise," grinned Riddick, "that I simply must hear." And he paused, and Riddick put a hand to his ear, and he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, and it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, the sound sounded merry. It couldn't have been, but it was merry. Very. He stared down at Whoville, and Riddick popped his eye. Then he shook, and what he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came, and somehow or other it came just the same. And Riddick, with his Riddick feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. He puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then Riddick thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that Riddick's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, Riddick, carved the roast beast. Happy holidays.